$100,000, and upon renewal of the application, they have to have a reviewed financial statement. The facilities for the growing facilities, processing facilities, and dispensing facilities will pay an annual fee based on the size of that facility. The fees will range from $5,000 to $25,000, and the sizes are enumerated in the statute. DHEC will institute a tracking system that will be from the seed to sale chain of custody, so DHEC will know where the seed is from the time it is beginning to its inception. All items sold at a licensed dispensary will have to be properly labeled, and that is enumerated in the statute in the bill too. They must including the amount of THC and the amount of CBD. The marijuana sold in the dispensaries is to be taxed in accordance with existing statute. This is one of the things the study committee found this summer, that the Department of Revenue has a taxing system in place. Health insurance companies are not required to cover the marijuana. An employer is not required to accommodate the use of marijuana at his place of employment. There is an annual report that shall be made to the General Assembly on the effectiveness of this program. The report will be made by DHEC. The bill also repeals the Controlled Substance Therapeutic Research Program. This has been on the books since 1980 and has never been used.
Thank you, Martha. We have two of the authors of the bill, and so I asked them for their comments. Senator Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments, and picking up to begin with on something that Martha said near the end, which is in regard to the provisions of the bill that provide for seed to sale chain of custody. We recognize that there are concerns among some that cannabis grown for medicinal purposes might somehow be diverted for recreational use. And what we found, Mr. Chairman, is that looking at best practices in other states, that there is a way of coding the plant so that you can track it throughout the system. And so a lot of effort was put into making sure that there wasn't diversion of something that is grown for medicinal purposes for recreational purposes. And I suspect one of the things that we'll focus on, and I'm counting on SLED to help us out here, is making sure that we've got the very best tracking procedures in place possible to provide that assurance. The second thing I will note is that this bill is, in my opinion, a logical extension of what the General Assembly did last session when it determined that it would be legal in South Carolina for doctors in consultation with their patients to authorize the use of a cannabis-related substance for epilepsy. CBD oil is the name of that substance. The reason for that is that there has been empirical evidence of palliative effect that CBD oil has on individuals with epilepsy. The person, or the little girl that inspired me to file this bill last year, Mary Louise Swing, was suffering up to 100 seizures an hour, and conventional pharmaceuticals were providing little to no relief. There has been tremendous progress made as a result of this CBD oil. So this is an example of where we can see lives that have been touched. The other thing that I want to point out is that South Carolina is not alone in regard to discussing this matter. Other states are discussing it, and in terms of where we fall on the spectrum, Mr. Chairman, we're on the very conservative end. You've got one end where you have states like Colorado and Washington, which has simply said we're going to legalize it for recreational medicinal uses, and we're not going to provide the sorts of restrictions that you might in regard to a controlled substance. We're on the other end of that spectrum here, and this is the approach I've chosen to take, knowing that South Carolina is a relatively socially conservative state, in that the cannabis is only going to be for medicinal purposes. It's going to be treated as a controlled substance. It's going to be authorized only in instances where physicians authorize it for patient use. There's got to be that consultation, and only in the context where there is a very strict seed to sale chain of custody tracking. So I realize we may get some criticism by some throughout this process for it not being a more liberal or more lenient policy, and that may be a debate for another day. But I wanted this panel to know that what Senator Huddard and I have come up with here is something that is very conservative and controlled and modest in regard to what's being discussed in other states. The other thing I will note is that last session in Washington, D.C., Congress passed a continuing resolution which contained a proviso, and it directed DOJ, or actually prohibited DOJ from enforcing the Schedule I cannabis prohibitions against any state that has legalized the use of cannabis for medicinal purposes. So for those concerns that may be expressed about our law being in contravention of federal law, I think it's important to note that that continuing resolution contains that particular directive to the DOJ. As Martha indicated, part of the bill that that was passed last year provided for a study committee to look into other conditions for which cannabis could be authorized for use by physicians to patients, again, for that narrow charge. And over the summer and the fall, we went to, I think, Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, and Florence, and held numerous hearings and heard testimony, some of which you'll hear today, of how cannabis-related substances can provide relief where conventional pharmaceuticals fail. And really that's the touchstone of what we're talking about here. We're talking about instances where conventional medications have not provided the degree of relief that a physician believes that a patient can experience with a cannabis-related process, or substance, excuse me. So with that by way of background, I'll yield to my co-sponsor, Senator Hutto, but I did want to hit those threshold issues. One, extension of what we did last year. Two, very conservative in terms of what other states are doing. Three, in accordance with what the continuing resolution passed by Congress has authorized the states to authorize it for medicinal use. And finally, everything is tied to the physician-patient relationship, and unless there is a physician making a diagnosis and authorizing its use, it cannot happen. So I think that's important as well. We're really, emphasizing that particular doctor-patient relationship. So with that, I'll yield.
Mr. Chairman, I want to first of all thank Senator Davis for taking the lead on this. He's been out on the forefront of making sure that we get all the facts and having the public hearings around the state. And I think what we've heard in general is that there are some illnesses or conditions that marijuana brings relief to those patients like nothing else has been able to do, and the doctors that would be in control of this will make that determination. I know there's some out there who want us to go all the way to like a Colorado model, and I want to stress that's not what this is. This is very narrow. It's focused on the medical uses of this plant that would help patients that suffer from some unique conditions. We know we've got people in South Carolina now that are having to make trips out to Colorado for their children, and we tried to provide for that last year. This is just a step further, and I think that that's the way to approach this, one step at a time, so that we make sure that as we authorize the use of this drug, that's being used appropriately.
Thanks, Senator Hutto. Before we go into the testimony, did Senator Nicholson or Senator Bright like to make any comments? Okay. I'd like just to make a few. Last year, Senator Davis had a very emotional bill come up with the cannabis oil. And one of the people that testified was a vet, and he tries to commit suicide, I think, 3 or 4 times a week. He's on multiple medications. And he says, he doesn't necessarily need that if he was able to do this medical marijuana. And he can't do that because the lady he's engaged with has a young child. And I think it struck us all when we heard that testimony. Now, this is a Senate bill, so it cannot make crossover. So at this point in time, I will tell you that even if we were to report it to full committee and report it to the floor, it is not going to go anywhere between now and the 1st of January. So it would be hopefully my intent, but I will yield to the staff. But we've got 2 authors here, and I'm inclined to move it to the full committee. I just may not do that and ask just to carry it over and see if we want any more hearings in the fall, and then really take this up to get it to the floor of the Senate in January. But that'll be the decision of both the full committee and this committee. We've got 24 people. Hold on.
I just want to thank Senator Hutto and Senator Davis for taking the lead on this, because there are many individuals in our state. I received several phone calls from parents with kids with epilepsy and the relief they've been getting from medical marijuana, and I think this is something that we really need to look into. If it can provide relief to these individuals, it's something that we should move forward with, and I just want to thank them for taking the lead on this.
I can make up, thank you, Senator. And of course, the subcommittee will decide what's best, but here would be my recommendation. I think it's very important that this subcommittee get it right. And there are a lot of moving parts to this legislation. I want to make sure that all concerns in regard to diversion efforts, in regard to recreational use are considered. I want to make sure that law enforcement has a full and complete say in regard to the seed to sale chain of custody provisions that we have. I want to make sure that the labeling provisions we have in regard to the various ratios of THC to CBD. I want to make sure, and I guess by way of saying that I hope that it remains in subcommittee so that we can work throughout the, after session is over, to perfecting this, because what I hope this bill ends up doing is incorporating the best practices of other states in all regards, and that it becomes a template or something that we can be proud of. And I think probably that is best done at this subcommittee level. I'm not sure exactly where the sentiment of the subcommittee is, but I think that this bill is detailed enough and specific and has so many moving parts, and I want to make sure that everybody's concerns are heard. So those would be my thoughts in regard to working going forward, Mr. Chair.
And I appreciate that. And I think one of the things that I give Senator Davis for credit is sometimes we see something coming and we're not prepared for it, and he must have had his Boy Scout years behind him because he wants this state prepared. But at this point in time, what I'm going to ask the audience, we've had some emotional bills in front of our medical affairs in the last year or two. I would tell you that we have 24 people. We're not going to get to all the speakers today. I'm going to try to pick a few that have really expressed a desire, or their state senator has called me and asked them if they could speak. We sometimes have them for, sometimes against. We ask for respect. Even if they don't share the views you share, we would expect respect for their views. So at this point in time, we would ask April Pace if she would like to come forward and share her concerns. April, thank you for being here, and both of you just have a seat.
I'm April, and this is Dixie, my daughter. You have to excuse her, she just had a seizure right before we walked in. She's been having seizures for almost 13 years now. Each year they get worse, they're more uncontrollable. We average 50 plus a day. All types of seizures, you don't limit it to one or the other, it's all above. And we have been on each and every medication there is. All the medications, the side effects have just been bad. And like 3 or 4 of them have deadly rashes, we've had that. All of them have the zombie effect, most of us have that. She's even had one, Keppra, which is one of the new, most popular ones, and it has a slang to it, Keppra Rage. Well, she went further beyond that. She had psychotic. She actually started calling herself Pixie. She tried to kill me, her sister, her dad, our dogs, everybody she could come in contact with, the nurses at the hospital, the doctors, and till we got her off this medicine. As I said, we've been through every single listed medicine. MUSC has had her on medicines that they've just went through clinicals. She has a VNS implant, which is a vagal nerve stimulator, and it goes off every so often. Triggers an electrical signal in the brain, and that's still not controlling them. We started the cannabis oil the first of the year, and most days now we average 6 to 8 seizures. We've actually had 12 days this year with no seizures. That's the first time in 12 years. But we still don't have complete seizure control. We need to be able to speak with our doctors and work with our doctors. Different strains of the cannabis works different for different kids. We need to be able to go out and get the different strains and work and see which one works best for her. You know, like an aspirin or an ibuprofen. And we need the whole plant of it, not just the CBD part. Because I'd like complete control for her. She needs some kind of a quality of life.
Thank you, April. Thank you, Dixie. Any other questions? Senator Davis.
Yes, ma'am, April. In regard to the CBD oil, and that's what we last year legalized and allowed doctors to let their patients consume it. Is that what you're referring to, the CBD oil? We didn't last year provide for a means of growing the cannabis and extracting and dispensing, so here in South Carolina. Can you tell us a little bit about the difficulty or your efforts in regard to getting the CBD oil and the degree of assurance that you have about its purity or its quality, or give me an idea of how you go about, you know, possessing what we've said is legal here to possess if doctors authorize it?
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's, you know, you're basically going underground. And I mean, it's easier to get heroin than it is to get CBD oil for your child. And I mean, they have the different head shops all around. They say they have it CBD, but it's just a hemp oil. It's not real. And there's so much fake stuff on the internet and trying all of that. I mean, we've been out of state. We've just been so many internet, just constantly begging and talking. And, you know, we've only had one, maybe two real reliable sources that we know that it's safe. But besides that, we don't. We have no safety net whatsoever. We, you know, I mean, the plant can have anything in it. It is a plant. It can have mold, mildew, chemicals, and, you know, if you just go and buy a bag from anybody, you don't know what that's in it. And then if you try to make your medicine for it, you don't know how that's going to work for her. It's
Tell me
very
a little
difficult.
bit about, you know, the law that we passed last year.
Yes.
Requires a doctor to authorize its use.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about consultation, if you can, if you feel comfortable with, about what the physician says about Dixie and you know, what he or she believes that a cannabis-related product can do. Give us an idea of a look inside that relationship, because I think that's important.
Several years ago, the doctor we had was recommending that we start looking underground for some oil. And so that was her only option. We've been through everything, you know, and limited, maxed out the different medicines she can have. And that was her last option. Well, we started looking, still wasn't comfortable, you know, we didn't want to go to jail. And then he left and we got a new doctor and we talked to him and he said basically the same thing. He said, you know, if you try it, you know, I'll sign any paperwork that says that's what you need. And he did. And he said, and I advise, they do blood work. We came down on medicine, and actually she was on, at the beginning of the year, she was on 8 different medicines. Now she's on 2.
You talked a little bit, April, about the 100 seizures a day that Dixie was. Compare, if you can, in a little more detail, what she was experiencing with the conventional medications. You talked about the various side effects, and
Yes.
then compare that with how she is today, so that we get an idea of, you know, how somebody's life may or may not have changed as a result.
One of the things, she would speak and nobody could understand what she said. I was like her interpreter. You know, she when she gets excited like a teenager, you know, she talked too fast, but you still never could understand her words. She could not clarify them, make them plain. And sentences, they get jumbled up all the time, and she'd say them wrong, and then conversations would be completely till the last part to the first part. When we started doing the oil, that immediately cleared up. And we were sitting at the dinner table that first evening, and we had dinner, and it was done, and my husband looked at me, he said, do you realize that I just understood the whole dinner conversation without asking you? And that was a big thing for us. And she's actually, she started cleaning her room. She started moving, and she went to Dollywood for 3 days with her grandparents. That does not happen. You know, I never That's the first babysitter I've had in 10 years. And that was great, I got to tell you. And it was great for both of us. And everybody's, you know, it's scary. It's scary to have someone with seizures, and the way she falls and hits